Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging immediately into an event that has, I think, definitively reshaped global politics in a single weekend.
Sort to overstate it.
Yeah, this stunning, really unprecedented capture of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Celicia Flores, in Caracas. This happened Saturday, January 3rd, 2026.
And this wasn't, some slow political decline or a domestic coup. This was a spectacular, large-scale, and very overt military operation.
U.S. Special Forces, federal agents, all executed on sovereign soil. The codename was Operation Absolute Resolve.
What we saw was arguably one of the most audacious, high-stakes military actions against a sitting head of state in the last century. People are making comparisons, of course.
To Noriega.
Yeah, to Noriega, exactly. But the sheer scale of the force used here, plus the target, a presidential compound in a capital city that's heavily fortified, it really makes this an event that stands alone. The political risk was just astronomical.
And that risk is exactly what we need to get into.
Yeah.
Our mission in this deep dive is to go way beyond the sensational headlines, the capture photos, the charges. We want to unpack the strategic intent.
Mm-hmm.
We have to ask, what were the economic drivers that really pushed this long-running maritime drug war into, outright regime change? And how did the administration even construct the justification for what looks like a military invasion?
And I think most critically, we have to look at the consequences. The immediate, massive, and potentially catastrophic geopolitical fallout from the U.S., essentially declaring it's going to temporarily run a sovereign nation.
Run its politics, and more importantly, its economy.
Exactly. So we'll be breaking down the mechanics of Operation Absolute Resolve. We'll trace that shift in thinking from, simple drug interdiction to this idea of commercial regime change.
And we'll analyze the implications of what the administration is now probably calling the Don Roe Doctrine.
That's right.
Okay, let's unpack this. The operation itself was, a flashpoint. But the military muscle flexing that came before it, that was a masterclass in deliberate, aggressive signaling.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't a sudden decision. It was preceded by a massive, sustained pressure campaign that was explicitly designed to soften the target and signal just how serious the U.S. was.
So what did that pressure look like on the ground, or I guess on the water?
Well, that campaign, if you look back, it was really the preparatory fire for the main assault. It started aggressively all through the fall. We saw a colossal military buildup right off Venezuela's coast.
Right, the warships.
Yes. The U.S. deployed its most advanced aircraft carrier, the nuclear-powered USS Gerald R. Ford. And it wasn't alone. There was a whole flotilla of other warships, and they were consistently positioned right there in the Caribbean.
So not just a presence, but a threat.
It was a deployment designed to demonstrate overwhelming conventional capability. It was a constant reminder right on his doorstep.
And the military engagement didn't just wait for the raid. It started on the water, didn't it?
It did, and aggressively. We know that since September, the administration was conducting this steady, kinetic maritime campaign. They were striking vessels that they alleged were involved in drug trafficking in the Caribbean and the Pacific.
And the numbers are pretty stark.
They're sobering. The administration officially confirmed striking at least 35 of these alleged drug vessels, and in the process, 114 people were killed.
Wow.
But what's crucial here is the shifting justification for these actions. Initially, they framed it purely as, destroying illicit cargo, a standard anti-drug op.
But that's not what it was, really.
No. White House staff themselves openly revealed that the true purpose had broadened dramatically.
Yeah, we heard those comments. I think it was White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles back in November who admitted the purpose was tactical. It was to attack those boats relentlessly until Maduro, and this is a quote, cries uncle.
Cries uncle. It stopped being a law enforcement operation against narcotics, and it became undeniably psychological and kinetic warfare. It was designed to exert maximum pressure on the regime's logistics, its funding, its morale.
They were actively showing him that he had no control over his own sovereign water.
Exactly. And that relentless pressure, it all culminated in one final documented attempt to avoid this, or maybe to set the moral stage for it.
The phone call.
The phone call. The president himself recounted having a final private call with Maduro 1 week before the strike. The message was very clear, very uncompromising. You got to surrender.
And Maduro gambled.
He gambled. We're told he hesitated, even came close to giving in. But in the end, he bet that the U.S. wouldn't take that final irreversible step. He stayed put.
And in doing so, he basically triggered the final phase of Operation Absolute Resolve.
He did. And that brings us to the planning and the intelligence, which is what elevates this from just a raid to a historic feat of military and espionage coordination.
The success of this really relied on months of meticulous, granular, deep penetration intelligence.
It absolutely did. It speaks to the scale and the detail of the planning, which we now know started as early as August. The CIA quietly inserted a small unit into Venezuela.
And their whole job was what? Just to watch him.
To get, and this is the official phrase, extraordinary insight into Maduro's movements and habits. And this wasn't high-level diplomatic intelligence. This was deep personal intelligence gathering.
They weren't just tracking his motorcades. I mean, the details that the administration provided are almost unbelievable. They knew everything. Where he slept.
What he ate, where he traveled. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dan Kane, even made a point of saying that U.S. agents knew about Maduro's pets.
His pets. What is the point of that? Is it just to show off, or is there a strategic purpose?
Well, it's twofold. First, it confirms absolute predictability for a zero-risk extraction. You leave nothing to chance. But second, and maybe more importantly, it sends a message after the capture. There was nowhere you could hide. We were in total control of your environment.
And the training for the operation matched that level of intelligence.
It did. Elite troops from various special mission units, they trained for months using a precise replica of the presidential compound.
Just like the Bin Laden raid.
Exactly the same playbook. And here's the detail that just underscores the absolute commitment to success. They trained with massive blowtorches.
Massive blowtorches. This is a visceral detail, isn't it?
It is. It was in case they needed to cut through the heavy steel doors of his designated safe room.
So they were ready for him to hole up and fight. Does that mean they expected a long, drawn-out battle inside?
It means they were guaranteeing that failure was not an option. When you bring blowtorches, you're ensuring you get your target no matter the cost to the building or the risk of a firefight. This wasn't an arrest attempt.
It was a guaranteed regime change.
Precisely. We also know who was on the core planning team, which I think is very revealing.
Right. It highlights the ideological drive behind this.
It does. The key figures were Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller.
That's a very specific group.
It's a critical mix. You have foreign policy hawks like Rubio, military strategists like Hegseth, the intelligence chief in Ratcliffe, and a domestic political strategist in Miller. This wasn't just a military capture.
No, this was the planning team for the day after. The team that Trump said would be temporarily running Venezuela.
Exactly.
So let's get to the night of the raid itself. Saturday, January 3rd, 2026. The timing was critical.
It was. Trump had approved the operation before Christmas, but the weather had delayed it for days. There was persistent wind and cloud cover over Caracas.
Not ideal for a helicopter assault.
Not at all. It only proceeded when the weather finally broke, giving them clear visibility and minimal turbulence. The final go order was given late Friday night, 10:46 p.m. Eastern Time.
And the scale of the force they sent? It's just breathtaking for a single operation.
It really is. Over 150 aircraft. We're talking heavy bombers, fighters, and crucial ISR intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance craft. They flew towards Caracas from 20 different bases.
20 bases?
This was not a quiet infiltration. This was an overwhelming display of air superiority designed to completely suppress any possible Venezuelan military response from the very beginning.
And the element of surprise was everything. Darkness over Caracas. Trump himself later suggested that the U.S. cut the power in the city.
Yeah, he said cryptically that the lights had largely gone dark due to a certain experience that we have, which...
It would have crippled any command and control.
Absolutely. And then the helicopters with the extraction force, Delta Force operators, and law enforcement, they came in incredibly low, just 100 feet above the water sometimes, to stay under the radar until the last possible second.
And once they were on the ground, they moved on this heavily fortified military fortress with just stunning speed.
And that blend of forces is a key point we have to keep coming back to. Delta Force and FBI agents.
Right. One for the force, one for the paperwork.
That's a good way to put it. The military provided the kinetic ability and the security, but the FBI agents were there to hold the warrant and officially execute the arrest. This was all done to uphold the administration's legal defense.
That this was a law enforcement action, not an invasion.
Exactly. And the speed was crucial. When they breached the residence, Maduro and his wife were taken completely by surprise. He only had seconds to react.
And those seconds cost him everything. He tried to make a run for it, didn't he?
He did. He tried to get to that steel-reinforced safe room, the very one they brought the blowtorches for. But the assault was just too overwhelming.
He didn't make it.
He was captured before he could even get inside the door.
And then the resistance started.
As expected, a brief but fierce firefight broke out with the remaining loyalist guards. We know one U.S. helicopter was hit by ground fire, though it was still flyable. A few U.S. troops had non-fatal injuries.
But the main objective was secure.
It was. By 3:30 a.m. Eastern, U.S. forces were out of the country, leaving behind a Caracas that witnesses said smelled of gunpowder and smoke, and suddenly a massive power vacuum.
And the White House sealed the story globally with a single devastating image.
That picture of Maduro on the USS Iwo Jima, handcuffed, blindfolded, wearing a plain sweatsuit.
It's a profound political statement.
Oh, it's designed to serve two purposes. First, proof of life and capture for the domestic audience. And second, proof of total American dominance and the final, irrevocable end of the Maduro regime.
And within hours, the legal process started. They flew him and his wife out. They arrived at Stewart Air National Guard Base in New York.
And from there, straight to the Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC, in Brooklyn, which is notorious.
Right. It's where they hold high-profile defendants. It signals they're preparing for a very public, very protracted legal battle.
And the charges are the exact legal hook they've hung this whole operation on, mirroring that 2020 indictment. Narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, and machine gun charges.
So the administration's entire defense, both here and to the world, rests on the idea that this was just a law enforcement exercise targeting fugitives, which lets them sidestep a declaration of war.
That is the entire legal scaffolding for this action.
Okay, that legal framing, this law enforcement exercise, brings us to the central tension of this whole deep dive, doesn't it? Was this really about prosecuting narco-terrorism? Or was it a calculated move to secure and control vast energy assets?
Because right after the capture, the administration rolled out a whole new foreign policy thesis that made the economic motivation, well, impossible to ignore.
This new thesis is what they're calling the Don Roe Doctrine.
Exactly. The president framed the action not just as law enforcement, but as a dramatic, permanent escalation of presidential authority to mold the hemisphere to promote U.S. interests and, this is the key phrase, to create, quote, advantageous conditions for business.
It's a striking and, frankly, aggressive twist on the old Monroe Doctrine.
A huge twist. The original doctrine was defensive, right? It was about keeping European powers out of the Western Hemisphere.
This new doctrine, the Don Roe Doctrine, is offensive. It asserts American dominance and explicitly links hard military power regime change to the goal of direct, immediate commercial ambition.
It fundamentally shifts the purpose of U.S. engagement from preventing external influence to actively asserting internal control for economic gain. I mean, it's a profound shift.
And it's a complete contradiction to the president's earlier promises to be a leader who would stop foreign wars, not start them.
But the justification for that reversal, for risking global condemnation, it lies deep beneath Venezuela's surface.
We're talking about oil. It's always about the oil.
Of course. Venezuela has the world's largest proven crude oil reserves. We're talking over 300 billion barrels. Historically, oil profits finance more than half of their entire government budget. It is the crown jewel.
But despite those massive reserves, production is terrible right now.
It's severely distressed. Because of years of crippling U.S. sanctions, systemic mismanagement within the state oil company, PDVSA, and just a profound lack of investment and maintenance, production is way down.
Far down.
It's only about 0.8% of global crude supply. But even in its broken state, it still manages to export around 900,000 barrels a day. And the biggest customer, by far, is China.
And the infrastructure isn't just old, it's basically falling apart, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the specific physical problems that make it so hard to get that oil out?
Well, that's where it gets complicated. Venezuelan crude is notoriously heavy. It's thick, almost like asphalt. To process it, you need to blend it with lighter crude. But sanctions prevented them from importing what they needed.
So the oil's just sitting there.
And the infrastructure to get it out, pipelines, safety systems, desalting plants, it's all decayed. The oil that does come out often has high salt and metal content, which can corrode the entire supply chain. The cost of production is astronomical for a very low-quality product.
And this decay, combined with the sanctions, is exactly why Maduro always claimed the U.S. was just using the war on drugs as an excuse to seize the country's oil.
An allegation that is now extremely difficult to dismiss, given what the administration itself said right after the capture. If the goal was just to get a narco-terrorist, you'd support the political opposition.
Instead, they signaled asset control.
Which brings us to the astonishing U.S. economic strategy for Venezuela that they announced. The president stated, unambiguously, that the U.S. will, quote, run it essentially until such time as a proper transition can take place.
That's a declaration of temporary administration over a foreign economy.
Yes.
Stunning.
And he didn't just stop at political control. He laid out the precise mechanism for the economic revival, U.S. corporate involvement. He said explicitly that U.S. oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, will go in.
Spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, and, quote, start making money for the country.
This is not humanitarian aid. This is a commercial takeover designed to rapidly restore production.
Let's talk about that commercial ambition. When he says the U.S. will be in the oil business and selling oil in much larger doses, what kind of investment are we talking about? Is this flipping a switch, or is this a decade-long project?
Oh, this is a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar effort. You're likely looking at an immediate capital investment of upwards of $20 billion just to stabilize the core infrastructure.
$20 billion just to start.
Just to start. The U.S. companies would have to fix the corrosion, restart blending, overhaul the export terminals. The complexity of reviving a decayed state monopoly like PDVSA means the administration intends to grant massive, multi-decade concessions to American firms.
Guaranteeing their investment with future revenue.
Exactly. It's about establishing a permanent, energy-secure relationship right on America's doorstep.
And the president justified all of this under the America First banner. He argued the U.S. needs to surround ourselves with energy and good neighbors. It's connecting national security directly to commercial profit.
And Defense Secretary Hegseth solidified that focus perfectly. He explicitly contrasted this operation to the 2003 Iraq invasion, saying that Trump flips the script.
Flips the script. What does that even mean?
The implication is stark. Unlike previous interventions that cost American blood and treasure for, ambiguous returns, this one ensures immediate access to additional wealth and resources without American fatalities.
So it's an intervention that pays for itself.
That's the framing. It's economically self-financing. A high-stakes economic gamble using regime change under a law enforcement pretext to secure massive energy resources and redirect a major oil exporter's profits, all while ensuring U.S. companies dominate the entire revenue stream for decades.
That is the Don Roe Doctrine in practice.
It is.
And this Don Roe Doctrine, executed by Delta Force and the FBI, immediately smashed into the reality of international law. The global reaction was swift, it was intense, and it was almost universally critical.
Absolutely. The geopolitical fallout was instant. For major global players, this wasn't about indicting two people. This was about the world's most powerful nation arresting a foreign head of state in his own capital.
It challenges the whole idea of national sovereignty.
It fundamentally challenges the core concept of Westphalian sovereignty, yes. The idea that nations are independent and free from external interference.
China's reaction was particularly pointed. And Maduro had met with a Chinese envoy just hours before he was captured.
They strongly condemned the U.S.'s blatant use of force and demanded his immediate release. For Beijing, this is a direct, aggressive challenge to their own regional ambition.
And Russia.
Equally vehement. They called it an act of armed aggression. They didn't equivocate at all. They demanded the release of what they called the legitimately elected president of a sovereign country.
So the usual rivals lined up. What about institutions like the UN?
Even the UN, which is usually so guarded, expressed deep concern. Secretary General Antonio Guterres was deeply alarmed. He said it set a dangerous precedent and that the principles of international law had not been respected.
And it wasn't just the great powers. We saw condemnation from all over.
We did. Key regional players joined in. Cuba denounced the criminal attack. Brazil's President Lula called it crossing an unacceptable line. Malaysia said it opposes all forms of foreign intervention. The global consensus, even from those who were happy to see Maduro gone, was that the U.S. had violated a foundational principle.
A principle that, once it's broken, can be used against anyone.
Exactly. Which forced the administration to just double down on its legal authority, predicated entirely on that law enforcement angle.
Right, so what was their defense exactly?
The line, pushed constantly by Secretary Rubio and Secretary Hegseth, is that this was not a military invasion, not an act of war. They insist it was a law enforcement exercise, and they only used military force as a protective measure to execute a valid arrest warrant.
And that legal gymnastics is how they justified bypassing Congress and the War Powers Act.
Yes. They insisted notification was impossible because the mission was trigger-based and sensitive. The president just added that Congress has a tendency to leak.
But the opposition in Congress immediately saw the bigger picture.
They did. Senator Tim Kaine vowed to force another war powers vote, calling it what it looked like, an illegal war for oil. But the most chilling warning, the one that really gets to the heart of the danger here, came from Senator Mark Warner.
Warner's question.
His question. He didn't mince words. He asked if this now means any large country can just indict the ruler of a smaller country and take that person out. He gave specific, alarming hypotheticals.
Right. How does the U.S. object if China tries to seize Taiwan's leaders based on a Chinese indictment?
Or if Putin uses the same justification to abduct Ukraine's president for, crimes against Russian speakers? That is the core geopolitical threat here.
The U.S. is basically arguing that an indictment from its justice system supersedes national sovereignty.
And by setting that precedent, the U.S. has handed a ready-made legal and strategic framework to authoritarian regimes to justify their own future aggressions. We've essentially validated the strategy for our rivals.
Meanwhile, back in Caracas, the operation created this immediate power vacuum. And the administration's hope for an easy transition was, well, it was instantly contradicted.
Venezuela's loyalists reacted quickly. They declared a state of national emergency. We saw reports of explosions at major military sites, suggesting some internal resistance or sabotage.
And then the Supreme Court stepped in.
Yes, acting under constitutional rules, they directed the vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, to assume the role of acting president for administrative continuity.
And the narrative conflict began instantly. Trump claimed Rodriguez had told Secretary Rubio she would do what you need, making her sound cooperative.
Yet Rodriguez immediately went on state television and delivered this defiant address. She called the capture an illegal and illegitimate kidnapping and insisted Maduro was the only president. The administration's expectation of a managed cooperation was just forcefully rejected.
And what about the actual Democratic opposition? Maria Corina Machado called for Edmundo Gonzalez to be recognized as president.
And Trump explicitly dismissed her. He claimed she lacked popular support, which suggests a crucial preference.
A preference for what?
It seems the U.S. is prioritizing a managed U.S.-led economic transition, one that guarantees those massive oil contracts, over a rapid democracy-driven transition led by a recognized but maybe less commercially favorable opposition leader.
So asset control first, democracy second.
That reinforces the Monroe Doctrine's focus on commercial advantage, yes.
And then there was the final and maybe most concerning geopolitical element to come out of this. The explicit threat aimed at Cuba.
This transition from Caracas to Havana was smoothed by intelligence from the capture itself. Secretary Rubio noted that many of Maduro's guards were Cuban and that this should concern Havana's incompetent, senile men.
And the president chimed in, too.
He did. He called Cuba a failing nation that they will end up talking about helping. This implies the Monroe Doctrine is a strategic template for the entire hemisphere, placing Havana squarely in the crosshairs as the next potential target for law enforcement action.
So while all of this was unfolding in Caracas, a simultaneous second front opened up right here in the United States, an organized, very sophisticated information war.
That's right. This was a rapid, synchronized ideological operation. It was run by a hardened cell of self-described Marxist, socialist, and communist organizations. We're talking about groups like the People's Forum, the Answer Coalition, and Code Pink.
And what's remarkable is the speed and synchronization.
Within 12 hours of the capture, the network activated. They bypassed traditional media, moving through digital channels, social media, with almost military-like precision.
And the messaging was identical across the board.
Hammered home instantly, designed to neutralize the administration's law enforcement story. The messaging was all illegal bombing, no war on Venezuela, and a total denunciation of U.S. imperialism. This was strategic ideological warfare.
And experts describe this network as a rapid response influence force, basically acting as civilian operatives.
That's right. And it's all coordinated under an umbrella group called the International People's Assembly. And the link is clear. Key leaders of this domestic cell, like Vijay Prashad and Manolo de los Santos, have been photographed in high-profile meetings with Maduro in Caracas.
So this dissent is coordinated and ideologically aligned with the foreign target.
The tactical operation is clear. A central group generates the talking points. They're spread through aligned media and then activated on the street by groups like Answer. They flooded the zone with their counter-narrative.
And managed to mobilize protests in New York, D.C., and an estimated 100-plus cities nationwide.
It was incredibly fast.
And then you see the most worrying part of this, the official echo chamber. Politicians endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America, like Rep. Tlaib, Rep. Ocasio-Cortez, and New York City Mayor Mamdani, immediately echoed those talking points.
They adopted the language and the timing perfectly, condemning the strike as illegal and about oil and regime change. It perfectly reinforced that foreign-aligned narrative within U.S. politics just hours after the operation.
Which suggests a deep-seated infrastructure ready to contest U.S. foreign policy from within.
It was a true information warfare success for Maduro's ideological allies.
And finally, let's look at the immediate logistical and social fallout. This had tangible, real-world consequences beyond politics.
Logistically, travel was hit immediately. The FAA issued restrictions on Caribbean and Venezuelan airspace, leading to flight cancellations from major carriers.
And on the connectivity front, Starlink made a very interesting move.
A fascinating move. It announced it would provide free broadband service to the people of Venezuela through February 3rd.
So is that pure humanitarianism or something else?
It's hard to say. Is it a strategic move to keep communication channels open? Bypassing state control. Maintaining connectivity is vital for any U.S.-aligned groups inside the country. It helps them receive outside information and coordinate locally.
And domestically, the reactions were just deeply polarized.
Completely. In Caracas, residents said the situation was calm but uncertain. No mass protests, no ecstatic celebrations, just waiting.
But in stark contrast, exiled Venezuelans in Florida were overcome with joy, tears, and chants of freedom. They were celebrating what they'd waited decades to see.
A powerful counterpoint, the certainty in Florida versus the uncertainty in Caracas.
And Miami's mayor, Eileen Higgins, quickly called for the reinstatement of temporary protected status, or TPS, for Venezuelans in the U.S.
The irony there is just inescapable, isn't it? The destabilization caused by the U.S. operation underscored that Venezuela was still too unsafe for many to return, necessitating protected status even after the regime change they had cheered for.
So we've covered the incredible mechanics of Operation Absolute Resolve, the capture of a sitting head of state, and we've broken down that central tension. The administration's legal claim that this was just law enforcement versus the clear stated intent of the Donroe Doctrine to seize control of Venezuela's oil for commercial benefit.
And this action, regardless of its success, has triggered a massive and immediate geopolitical backlash, especially around the violation of sovereignty, and it's fueled a sophisticated domestic information war right here at home. The administration has positioned itself as the temporary steward of a foreign nation, explicitly prioritizing economic access over a swift democratic process.
So what does this all mean for the future of global power? The administration relied so heavily on the specific legal justification that this was a law enforcement arrest of indicted fugitives, not an act of war. That's what allowed them to bypass Congress and international norms.
Right.
And considering the unprecedented global condemnation and the direct, terrifying warnings from senators like Mark Warner about authoritarian regimes setting similar precedents, the idea that China could claim the right to seize Taiwan's leaders or Putin to seize Ukraine's president, this raises a critical long-term question for you, the listener.
Which is?
What are the enduring non-military consequences for global diplomacy and the foundational concept of national sovereignty when the most powerful nation asserts the moral and legal right to execute an arrest warrant anywhere on Earth, using overwhelming military force as the shield for its own commercial and political objectives?
That thought and the unfolding reality of the Donroe Doctrine is what we'll leave you with today. Thank you for joining the Deep Dive.